connect to their audio. All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the San Francisco Interfaith Council's weekly online briefing for faith leaders. Today, we talk about the federal resources available to communities of faith to mitigate the economic impact of COVID-19. Today's session is hosted by the San Francisco Interfaith Council and supported by the Joint Information Center of the San Francisco COVID Command Center. Some housekeeping for today. Audio, video, and chat will be monitored and recorded for record keeping, training, and quality assurance. By default, all participants will be muted and video turned off to minimize distractions. For chat, to submit a question or comment, select the chat button at the bottom of your screen and send a message to Q&A. They will be shared with the speakers and panelists after the meeting for response. Thank you. Get tested, San Francisco. You can save lives and stop the spread of COVID-19 by getting tested through your healthcare provider. If you don't have health insurance or can't get tested through your provider, visit sf.gov/gettestedsf or call 311 for information on getting tested at a city-run testing location. A safe and effective COVID-19 vaccine, coupled with continued preventative measures, are our best tools to end the COVID-19 pandemic and safely reopen San Francisco. Go to sf.gov/COVID vaccine for information on eligibility, vaccination sites, including locations, and links to book appointments if available. Now is the time to come together, San Francisco. We've been through so much in the last year. Together, we can stop Asian discrimination, bias, hate, and violence. The COVID-19 virus has no race or nationality. It is simply a disease. To report a hate crime, please contact the San Francisco Police Department at 415-553-1133. A special note that the San Francisco Interfaith Council is a sponsor of this program. And now at this time, I'd like to hand the floor over to the Executive Director of the San Francisco Interfaith Council, Michael Pappas. Michael, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alisa. And as we near our 50th program, it's hard to believe we extend heartfelt thanks to the Joint Information Center's virtual outreach team for their ongoing support and for providing both the platform and the tech staff for us to be able to offer these invaluable programs. Good morning, I'm Michael Pappas, and on behalf of the San Francisco Interfaith Council, I want to welcome you to this week's online briefing for faith leaders. Reopening houses of worship amidst the ongoing pandemic poses unique challenges. In many cases, religious campuses house not only sacred space for worship, but also administrative offices, educational buildings, and community centers that host feeding, senior, youth, and cultural programs. Maintaining such facilities and staff in good times has been a struggle for San Francisco communities of faith. Exacerbated by the pandemic, the economic impact for some, if not many, has been devastating. This week's online briefing for faith leaders, hosted by the San Francisco Interfaith Council and supported by the COVID Command Center's Joint Information Center virtual outreach team, welcomes San Francisco District Office U.S. Small Business Administration Director, Julie Clowes, who will present on programs and grants that benefit houses of worship and religious institutions facing the financial burdens of COVID mitigation. Her presentation will focus on important federal resources available to communities of faith to support their financial, operational, and programmatic needs as they prepare to reopen their facilities. At this time, it is a huge privilege, honor, and great pleasure to introduce the matriarch of Interfaith in San Francisco, the indefatigable Rita Semmel, to offer welcome on behalf of our board and to read the Interfaith statement.
Thank you, Michael. and welcome to everybody. It is a great pleasure to be with you, and it is my honor to read our interfaith statement, which we read at every meeting. This is an interfaith community. Whatever our individual belief, it can be freely expressed here with no apologies. If we are invited to offer a prayer in this setting, it should be offered according to the tradition with which we identify. If we are invited to speak on a subject from the perspective of our tradition, we are free to do so without fear of offending those who come from another tradition. We come together as people of faith to learn from each other, that we might better understand the multiplicity of faith traditions in our city and in our world. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you, and God bless you, Rita. I was thinking you have your fingerprints on so many interfaith endeavors in San Francisco, and in particular the Presidio, where we have not only the San Francisco Interfaith Council, but we are housed in the Interfaith Center at the Presidio, and Rita was instrumental in founding that, not only the space, but the mission and the vision for what's happening in that space. And that space is essentially a hub for interfaith work in the entire Bay Area. It's got a sense of neutrality, but it's where our colleagues from our neighboring counties have a home, and we work collaboratively regionally on interfaith work. And joining us today to ground us in a reflective moment is the executive director of the Interfaith Center at the Presidio, the wonderful friend, Reverend Gerald Caprio.
Thank you so much, Michael. As recently as yesterday, I had a brief conversation with Rita, and as she has been known to do, reminds us of that wonderful theme of Tikkun Olam, which is to repair the world, to heal the world. And that is the common thread that we all share in all of our faith traditions. You and I were here today because we have committed ourselves to this service. We labor in the service of humanity. Now, as recently as a couple of weeks ago, we honored Earth Day, and that reminds us that we are children of this planet, and therefore we are one, whether we like it or not. And that this planet evolved over many billions of years, which again reminds us from nature that change is always incremental. And therefore, our labors contribute incrementally to the whole. So it helps us now and then to step back and take the long view. We accomplish in our personal lifetimes only a tiny fraction of the magnificent enterprise that is Tikkun Olam. Nothing we do is ever complete, which is a way of saying that the so-called kingdom always lies before us. No statement of ours says all that could be said. No prayer of ours fully expresses our faith. No single program accomplishes our mission. That is what we are all about. We plant the seeds that one day will grow. We water seeds already planted, knowing that they hold future promise. We lay foundations that will need further development. We provide yeast that produces effects far beyond our capabilities. We cannot do everything. And in a sense, that is a liberation. This enables us to at least do something and do it well. It may be incomplete, but it is at least a beginning, a step along the way, an opportunity for the Lord's grace to enter and do the rest. Be encouraged. Let us go about our work in true faith, believing that what we do incrementally will change the world. God bless you all.
God bless you, Father Jerry, and thank you for that inspiring reflection. Father Jerry, they say that confession is good for the soul, and I have a confession to make. Our featured presenter today is somebody I've already heard present, and because I was so inspired by her presentation and informed, we've invited her back. Julie Clowes, who's the district director for San Francisco District's Office U.S. of Small Business Administration, had the occasion to speak with the CEOs of the faith-based social service agencies recently. Her presentation is comprehensive, in some cases overwhelming, but very important. And I think, we've put on so many of these programs. Today's program is about resources that are available to help congregations and religious institutions reopen. I'm going to ask everybody to take special notes. Again, we will be sending this recording out. Share it with your governing bodies. We will have resource links that will accompany Julie's presentation. And so without further ado, Julie, thank you for being with us, and we look forward to your remarks.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you to the council for the invitation today. I do appreciate the opportunity to come talk to all different audiences. As you can imagine, this past year, we've been trying to just reach out to everybody we possibly can to make sure they're aware of the programs, especially the programs that are the COVID financing support, because we did broaden beyond our typical reach of just traditional small, for-profit entities, and are able to assist nonprofit entities, which includes the faith-based organizations. And so I'm going to share my screen and try to go through some things. Some we can go in greater detail, others maybe in less detail. I know, as Michael said, it can be overwhelming. We strive to break it down and make it a little more digestible. And with the caveat, especially when we talk about these COVID relief programs, it's still a little bit of a moving target. There's pots of money, they come, they go, unfortunately. New programs are developed. This last 15 months, we've had 4 major pieces of legislation from Congress that created programs and have given this tiny agency well over $1 trillion, which is never a number I thought I would ever say when it relates to our programs. We usually only get appropriated, millions of dollars, let alone trillions in this case. So let's talk a little bit about SBA. I know many people probably don't think about SBA when they're a nonprofit, especially a faith-based organization, and that's understandable. In normal times, well, we still have, we have a bunch of core programs. I would pretty much divide everything into 4 buckets. So we have a financing bucket, and in the non-COVID times, we do have a variety of financing programs from microfinance, $50,000 or less, all the way on up through actually venture capital. We do play in the venture capital space. And then we also have loan guarantee programs offered through commercial lenders and other financing institutions. The second bucket that we typically offer, we offer a lot of services, is government contracting. So the US government is the largest purchaser of goods and services in the world. And our goal is to help small businesses get, a piece of that pie, at least 23% of the government spend, the federal government spend each year. And I know in California here, the US government spends about $50 billion annually. And so my goal is to help our small businesses, get a bigger piece of that $50 billion pie here in California. The third bucket, which I actually think is one of the most invaluable things we offer, is free business advising and low and no cost training. So we have a lot of resource partners that we work with. You may have heard of some, such as our small business development centers, our SCORE program, our women business centers, and we have a veteran business outreach center that covers Northern California as well. All of these programs are the one thing they have in common is that all of their services are free of charge. All the business advising services are free of charge. And then the last bucket we have is the disaster bucket, which is what we're going to talk a lot more about today. But I kind of wanted to give you the bigger framework of what SBA offers. And why SBA might not have been on your radar screen before is that under the statutory definition of a small business, it actually says a for-profit entity. So most of the time, we are not eligible or able to extend our programs to nonprofits because of that statutory definition that a small business is a for-profit entity. However, when it comes to our disaster programs, that's where everything changes. We are able to work with small businesses. And actually, if this had been a physical disaster like a wildfire, hurricane, floods, we are actually able to help everybody in that circumstance. So it can be homeowners, it can be landlords, renters, big business, small business. For physical disaster assistance, we actually assist everybody. But with a pandemic, obviously, we're talking more about economic disadvantage and economic assistance. So we're going to take a little bit of a tour into some of the programs that could be applicable. I know some of you out there probably have already accessed some of these programs. Some of it might be new to some of you. But before we jump into that, I did want to point out as a point of reference, and when you get the slide deck, you'll have the links. There is some information on our website that is specific to the faith-based community, especially in disaster assistance. So if there's ever any question about eligibility for especially our Paycheck Protection Program and the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, we do have an entire FAQ section that talks about how faith-based organizations are eligible, how it does not impact the mission or the objectives of the organization if they accept federal dollars. Also, the fact that clergy salaries can be paid out of like Paycheck Protection Program, for example. I know when the programs first launched, there was some question about that. And so this FAQ document will hopefully settle some of those questions should you have them. Also wanted to point out, we do have a faith-based community section on our disaster page that talks about how SBA assists, but it also points to some other resources that you may want to consult with if you're looking just for some additional resources, not just on disaster recovery, but even on preparedness and other things that might tie in, especially to whatever your specific mission might be, especially if you're doing, healthcare services or providing food or shelter to people. And those can include programs from USDA, Homeland Security, and our and HHS. But let's talk more about programs that can support your organization. So of our economic relief programs, there's kind of two categories: loans and grants. So the ones I highlighted in bold on this slide deck show the programs that small nonprofit organizations are eligible to apply for. I think probably everybody's heard of Paycheck Protection Program, even if you only heard it as a buzzword on the news. But then also our Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. I would call those two kind of the core products, if you will, the core programs. We've also added, and this is in the grant bucket, a Targeted Idle Advance Program, and then also the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant Program, which is very niche. It is very focused on venues. And then we also recently launched the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. That one, however, unlike the rest of these, was specific for-profits. So unfortunately, nonprofit entities are not eligible for the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, but it could be for the rest of these. So as a quick compare and contrast, Paycheck Protection Program is largely focused on payroll. The whole mission intent behind that program was to try to prevent a lot of people from going on unemployment last year when we all went into the shelter in place mode originally. Keep people off of the unemployment rolls, keep them paid. Obviously, when we've learned a lot since when the pandemic started to today, and we clearly know that 2 months worth of salary was clearly not enough to pay people, but that was the intent of this program, and it did help a lot of businesses. But because the intent is payroll, how you use those funds is more narrowly scoped. You had to spend at least 60% of the loan proceeds on payroll costs, and then you could spend up to the 40% on the eligible non-payroll costs. This program, as of what is today, Thursday, so as of Tuesday, this program has run out of funding, unfortunately. There is, though, a little bit of funding left for our CFIs. Those are our community finance institutions. These are CDFIs or MDIs, minority depository institutions. They had a special carve out of funds, and they still have a little bit left in their carve out. So if you are an organization that had thought about this program and had not yet applied, and you're interested in it, the big takeaway is today, find a CFI and apply, because as we see, the funding goes fast. I don't want to take too huge of a deep dive into this program. I'll give you kind of the overall. For those of you who maybe already have a PPP loan, that's fantastic. You're probably looking at the forgiveness piece of it now. What's unique about this, it technically is a loan. You get it from, receive the loan from one of our participating lenders. But the nice thing with this one is it has a forgiveness component. So if you spend the money in the manner intended, that means 60%, at least 60% on payroll, and no more than 40% on our eligible non-payroll costs like rent, utilities. You can cover some supplier costs. You could cover PPE. You could cover any sort of operating, like standard operating expenses you might have. If you spend the money on those items, you can then apply for forgiveness. And if you've met the criteria, you can have this loan forgiven. So in essence, it has the effect of being a grant, even though it is technically a loan. There is partial forgiveness in some cases. And if for any portion that is not forgivable, it will convert to a term loan, but it is at a 1% interest rate for 5 years. So it is pretty favorable loan term as well. Moving down the list here, you'll see I'm going to skip over the debt relief program because that applies to people who had a pre-existing SBA debt. These are our regular financing programs. And because they're not open to nonprofits, I don't believe anybody on this call today would have existing SBA debt. So I'm going to keep going down to some of the programs you can apply for today. The other big one being economic injury disaster loan. And this is a loan. It does not have a forgivable component. This will need to be paid back, but it is a loan offered on very favorable terms. For nonprofits, it is a 2.75% interest rate, and you automatically get a 30-year payment term. And you automatically get deferment on your initial payments. And the deferments are going into 2022. It's about 18 months deferment right now. So this is a loan that is a working capital loan. So it is much more broad in scope. You can use it to cover pretty much any of your ordinary business expenses. This can include payroll. But if your organization relies on some contract support, you can also use this fund, this loan to pay contractors. You cannot do that with Paycheck Protection Program. You can do that with the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. You can also use it to cover all of your regular business expenses. So, if you have lease or mortgage payments, if you have utility bills, if you provide, services to the community and you have to incur costs to provide those services, like supplies, et cetera, all of that can be covered under this program. This program right now it's offered direct from SBA. So you do not need to go to a bank or any other lender. You come directly to SBA. You can apply right on our website. We are offering loans now up to $500,000. That's the maximum amount right now. And again, it has the very favorable 2.75% interest rate with a 30-year term, automatic. Tied to that program is the targeted idle advance and the supplemental targeted idle advance. And I do actually have some slides on that one. So that one is not a program that you could go out and apply for today. It is kind of a cousin program, if you will, to the idle advance that was offered this summer per the CARES Act. That program quickly ran out of funding and was never reauthorized. But in the last 2 rounds of legislation, we did get this targeted idle advance, which is meant to help those businesses that applied for idle advance over in 2020 and did not receive the full $10,000, or applied for the program, but unfortunately it had already run out of money, so they were not eligible to receive the grant funds. This is a grant of up to $10,000, but its targeted idle advance has some specific criteria that you can see on the screen. It is for businesses and nonprofits that are located in low-income communities. You have to show a 30% economic loss between 2019 and 2020, and you have to have 300 or fewer employees. So if you had already applied for the idle program in 2020, chances are you also checked the box to get that idle advance. And so if that is what you have done, you should have automatically been getting a direct email from SBA inviting you to apply for this program. And the application for this will walk you through these eligibility items just to check the box to make sure you meet those eligibility items before you can get the loan the grant of up to $10,000. So while the idle loan is a loan that needs to be paid back, the targeted idle advance is the grant portion. And I know that gets confusing, and I wish Congress had given them different names, but one is a loan and one is a grant. And you can have both together. And similarly, if you had already applied for PPP and are wondering if you can apply for the idle loan, the answer is yes. You can have both of those programs, just so long as you're not using them to pay the same expenses at the same time. I know a lot of organizations, especially if they have, a couple of employees, might leverage PPP to pay 100% salary expenses, and then they use the idle loan to kind of pay for everything else. This program, if you have gotten an invitation to it, great. If you have questions about it for any reason, you can always reach out to us in the district office. We'll try to answer them. Or you can see there's a dedicated email box, this targeted advance at sba.gov. This program is actually managed out of our disaster office. So they are providing direct assistance to answer questions for this program as well. So this process, again, you'll get an email invitation to go into a portal online, and you'll answer a series of questions and submit. Let's see, I'm going to skip over now to Shuttered Venue Operators Grant, which again, this is very niche focused. So I'm not sure if anybody who's listening today will qualify for this, but I did want to flag it for you in case maybe you are a facility that does have a live venue. Maybe you do have events or used to have events when we were able to. So I did want to flag this for you because this is a grant program. There's $16 billion available in this program to help entities that are live venue operators, theatrical producers, live performing arts, and even some cases, some zoos and museums can qualify as well. There are very specific definitions for what a live venue operator is, what a promoter is, performing arts organization, etc. So if you think you have you can qualify for this program, or maybe you have a subsidiary that might qualify for this program, I do encourage you to look at our website. It has a lot of information. There's FAQs, there's a user guide, there's a lot of information, especially with these definitions, to see like, okay, do I actually qualify? Do I meet the standards that are laid out in this? A lot of those standards come from the statute that created this program. So this will help you break it down and understand if you're the type of entity who meets these definitions. But the other, this program is live now for applications, and it again is available directly through SBA's website. You will see that sba.gov/SVO grant is the jumping off point to get you to see this information, to read more about the program, and also the link to the portal where you can apply directly online. Most an organization can get under this program is $10 million. Crosswalk, this is kind of to show you that a lot of our programs can be used in concert with each other. I think for most faith-based organizations, they're looking at the PPP and the EIDL program. And as I've said, those two can definitely be used together. The one thing I wanted to talk, also maybe flag and put on your radar more so, is this Community Navigator pilot program. And we have a little bit of information on our website, sba.gov/navigators. This is a $100 million grant program, but it's for eligible entities who will be able to provide technical assistance to small businesses, whether it's a small business that's already in existence and has been affected by the pandemic, or it's somebody who's maybe looking to start a small business. So I'm not certain if any of the organizations today have like an economic development component to the services that you offer. But in case you did, I wanted to flag this program for you as it's coming. We haven't launched this one yet. This will be what I'll call a traditional grant. So if you're used to applying for federal or state grants, this is probably going to look much more traditional in its approach and in its application. When we're ready to launch the notice of funding opportunity, it will be posted where most federal grants are on grants.gov. Like I said, it's for up to $100 million total in this bucket. We're looking for organizations to kind of come together and partner to more collaboratively and cohesively offer services to our small business community. We call it a hub and spoke model. So the hubs are the entities that can apply for this grant, and then they will partner with spoke organizations that are more grassroots level, boots on the ground into the communities, really looking for organizations that are active and already, trusted and working within their communities. And this can include the gamut. We're really trying to reach what people might traditionally call underserved communities. So this would be minority communities, and especially being able to offer in-language resources and support. It can include rural, it can include micro businesses, it can include women, it can include LGBTQ, any business that maybe hasn't really ever engaged with SBA or engaged with some of these resources because either they didn't know they existed, or they were intimidated, or they didn't know how. Really, we want to look for organizations that can help us break down some of those barriers so that we can really reach and serve and provide resources to all of our small businesses. And so the last slide is just how you can reach us here in San Francisco. Out of San Francisco, we actually cover a very wide swath of Northern California, from pretty much the Santa Cruz, Monterey area, all the way up to the Oregon border. So let's stop share. There we go.
Julie, thank you so much. This was perfect, comprehensive, and comprehensible. And I know that there's going to be a lot of questions. I actually have one, but I will save it to after our presenters have had the opportunity. We have three wonderful faith panelists today. They are sort of boots on the ground who express their faith through their works. We will begin with Reverend Dr. Joseph Bryant, who is the pastor of Calvary Hill Community Church. I know that Pastor Bryant is also overseeing an amazing education program at his congregation, and has been working with Reverend Jesse Jackson in the Rainbow Coalition Push. We are so happy to have you, Pastor Bryant, and would you kind of share with us your experience of reopening and also how your experience relates to Julie's presentation?
Thank you so much, Michael. It's a pleasure to be here with you. And let me just say to you and your team, the entire region, our entire faith community and the community at large is indebted to you all for this diligence each week coming on, providing us this type of support, insight, information. It's been so critical for us to hear these voices, provide us the things that we need in order to survive and thrive and sustain ourselves. And so uh, just beyond words, being able to express our gratitude to you, Michael, and to the matriarch Rita Semmel, and to all of those that are behind the scenes, John McKnight with the COVID Command Center and Joint Information Team. Thank you for providing this outlet for us each and every week. And to Julie, thank you for just an insightful presentation for us. We're grateful for what has transpired in terms of our ability to support our community. As Michael mentioned, we have a community learning hub at the Calvary Hill campus where we provide students support initially for families that did not have internet for themselves and needed a safe place for their children to learn and to go on Zoom and to be able to engage their educational process. And we also are part of the San Francisco Faith-Based Coalition, and we've been addressing food security since the beginning of the pandemic, and now provided over 220,000 meals to San Franciscans in need, particularly to our senior population. And then, as Michael mentioned, I do have the honor of working for Reverend Jesse Jackson as the executive director of our West Coast initiatives, particularly Silicon Valley Diversity, Inclusion, Technology programs. And that really leads me to my question, because a lot of what I've observed as we have engaged these past 14 months now since the announcement of the pandemic and the shutting down and sheltering in place is that technology is such a critical element for our survival. Here we are on a Zoom call and have done so now for 49 weeks with this group, Interfaith Council. And there are so many churches, faith-based entities that need technical support, are still trying to figure things out. And we've discovered, even though we've been leading this program for several years now, we've implemented technology into a lot of churches around the country. So many churches were not prepared for the pandemic and had not tapped into some of the things, live streaming, online giving, having a healthy website and things of that nature, just to remain viable during the pandemic. And now post-pandemic, even with resuming services, people are still going to want to have the experience online because that's what they become familiar with. And so a couple of questions in and around the long-term recovery process, because I know a lot of the African-American faith entities in particular, there's a lack of resource to provide the kind of ongoing technology support that they need just to engage week to week general services, Bible studies, and things of that nature. And so how do we begin to usher resources into our faith communities that need to just survive by being able to be online in a healthy way consistently, have access to broadband that's needed? And then even for one of our programs that we train seniors, we train staffs, but the capacity need is so great. I was grateful to hear, and I was taking so many notes about the I think you called it the Navigators program that's coming, because I was thinking we've got to be able to provide more support to our faith communities that don't have the technical expertise. And so what kind of thoughts and processes are you either in discussions about, hearing about, that will allow us to provide more support, technology support to our faith entities? And how can we partner with you where, as Michael said, we have boots on the ground, we have a tech center where we can help train individuals, we can train staff, seniors, whoever may need it, because it's on both sides. The institution needs it and the members need it. And so how can we figure out ways to partner and provide those kind of resources? And since some of us have the expertise and we want to share it, what can we do, and how is SBA thinking about the long-term recovery to help churches and faith communities engage and remain viable in this, not only this season, but the next season? Thank you.
And thank you. Do you want me to answer that right now, or we wait? Okay. No, I think in some of that, you're reading my mind, sir. The technology enabled. I'm actually temporarily dual hatted. And I'm the Deputy Associate Administrator in an acting capacity right now for our Office of Entrepreneurial Development back at headquarters in DC. And we're going through this exact process right now, looking forward the next, 4 or 5 years. What do we want to provide? How do we provide it? There's some more information gathering that we clearly need so that we can make smart decisions. But business sustainability and I think technology is a huge component. This past year has forced us to go digital, whether you wanted to or not. And there's a lot of gaps because businesses, either like for all the reasons you just named, whether you're a nonprofit or whether you're the mom and pop, dry cleaner down the street. So this is something that I think SBA is going to figure out. What role do we play as an agency, and what are our sister agencies' roles? Broadband, that's definitely not us, but there are, I will be shocked if there's not a bigger push to make sure broadband access across the country as a priority, infrastructure development priority, if you will. But from our space for SBA, it's looking at, one, it's education to help people understand what kind of technology they need, how they can access it, and how it's going to help their business. And again, those decisions are, whether you're a for-profit or nonprofit, those are the same kind of decisions. And having, what the federal government can do is kind of be that convener also, right? I mean, we've got Silicon Valley in our backyard, and, who's to say we can't convene some of those experts and say, hey, our small businesses, our nonprofit community, may have cobbled together with duct tape and whatever to make this last year work. But how do we digitally enable all of these businesses? And so I think those conversations are starting. I don't know that we have plan, this program launched and this program launched, but it's definitely something that is important and will be a focal point probably in the very near term. But and figure out what exactly SBA can do to help further that cause. So yes.
Julie, thank you. And Pastor Bryant, as you were speaking, I was thinking of the words of St. Paul, who said, give a person a fish and they're satisfied for a day. Teach a person how to fish and they're satisfied for life. So I think these trainings and educational opportunities are going to be paramount looking forward, especially to the long haul. So thank you. Thank you for your remarks. Reverend Dr. Megan Rohr, the pastor of Grace Lutheran Church, is no stranger to this program. She has offered prayer. She's been a faith panelist more than once, and she has presented. She wears many, many, many hats. Pastor Megan, we talk about boots on the ground, like Reverend Dr. Bryant, you are out there in the field seeing the needs. Would you share with us your reflections on this, and then, of course, pose a question to Julie for clarification?
Absolutely. Thank you, Michael, and everyone for this really informative chat. One of the things that I've been thinking about during your talk is that I grew up in South Dakota. Not many people can say that, but my family survived the Great Depression, and my mom was a teller who worked herself up to vice president of a bank and retired from the same bank she started at as a teller. And our Lutheran community and many of the faith communities out here, we're nonprofits, not because we're not good at making money, but because we think if we can make the best stewardship choices of the finances we have, that's much harder, frankly, and a better use of ways that we can care for our community. So, but the difficulty that brings is if productivity from a small business standpoint comes from who has the highest income in the budget and who has the most robust staff and who is able to show over lots of different years that they consistently have income, and our income comes in by a faith and a prayer and passing a plate to people whose income comes from a faith and a prayer, it becomes sometimes really difficult and cumbersome to prove that we're worthy of a 40-year, 30-year loan, because some of us are just holding it together with duct tape, not because we're not going to hold it together, but because we really are putting our attention to what the most emergent need is. And so our congregation, when things hit the fan economically, we decrease the number of paid staff and increase the number of unpaid staff. The number of in-kind donations we all work with is astronomical, I think. In my work caring for the homeless in San Francisco, we got over $1 million worth of grants over a certain number of years, but it all looks really non-traditional. Even our own kind of IRS statements are non-traditional and hard for us to even get personal loans just because of the way we think differently. And so my question for you is, how can we as faith communities either learn to speak the language of looking good on paper or advocate to the people that we need to advocate to, that what we do is good stewardship and great financial resources and usually produces 100-fold what we would promise, because we'd feel so guilty we didn't use the grant funds the right way. And for our congregation, it's only worked because we have a separate nonprofit, and that separate nonprofit can kind of downplay some of those faithful words, but we don't want to downplay our faithful words. We want to be recognized as people who are strong in financial ability, and that we're not going to waste nobody's money if we don't have to. And I'll also add, my congregation was only able to pay me through all of this because we got a PPP loan. And so I'm deeply grateful for that. But if any advice you have about how we can look better, look as good on paper as we are, and advocate to the offices where they're making decisions about the types of grants that are being extended, I think would be really helpful for this coalition of people who would love to be holy agitators to help make sure that kind of grant support happens.
Sure. It's I think this last year has, made us think about things differently in a lot of regards. And, the interesting thing with SBA is because we historically, through our more, pre-pandemic times, and our programs typically aren't available to nonprofits. So we are not as well versed in working with nonprofits and the nuances that come with your accounting practices and where your income stream. I fully get it. I had a nonprofit and I'm on the board of one. Totally understand what you're saying. But I think, I can't say with any certainty whether SBA is going to be able to open up its programs after this to nonprofits as general. I mean, that's literally going to take an act of Congress. Not to say that won't happen. Just it's not an internal decision that we as an agency can make, unfortunately. But I do think there's appetite to have more of those conversations. And I also think, that we should, most of our resources, because we are geared towards for-profits, but that doesn't mean, nonprofit can't come to be educated through our sessions. Like if you want to, business, you're still a business, even though you're not personally lining your pockets with money, you're still a business and you still need to operate in some regards that way. And not lose sight of your mission and why you exist. So there is that fine line. And I do think, we can and should do a better job of, even on the education side, of what that looks like. You said, like how to, if you do need to go for a traditional loan, how do I talk like a banker and fit into that world? And we, we definitely can work on the education space and help in that regard. And I also think, the disaster program, I will pull that away from the rest of the lending programs because it is a little different and the standards are a little different. Obviously, we want to make sure people are going to be, if they're going to take on a $500,000 debt, that they will be able to repay it over time. But that's not, it's not scrutinized in the same way as if you walked into your corner bank and said, I want to get a loan. They're two different levels of scrutiny, if you will. So, but definitely, I do encourage, even if you're a nonprofit, to reach out with some questions, and we can try to, in the interim, while the agency is figuring out what kind of resources we can offer more long-term to nonprofits, let us help you locally, even if we can connect you with some other partners that we do know have more robust programs for nonprofits right now.
Thank you, Pastor Megan, and listening to Reverend Dr. Bryant, who is taking copious notes. I'm guessing that, Julie, you're taking some copious notes too, because I think that this is an education as well for you as for us in terms of this particular genre of businesses. And so thank you. Thank you for that. Last but not least is Reverend Dr. Carolyn Ransom Scott, who serves as a community outreach inner city missionary. I was reflecting with Dr. Scott earlier that I've known her for 14 years. And when I first came to this position, she was doing amazing work, bringing together the clergy of the community in the Bayview once a month, and for so many good works that we were working on. There was a program called Project Homeless Connect that was just emerging back then, and she helped us get it off the ground in the Bayview and host a program there. But her continual commitment to good works, especially in her neighborhood, but throughout the city, is laudable. Reverend Dr. Scott, we are grateful for your presence here.
Thank you so much, Michael. And I just echo Dr. Bryant, and cannot thank you enough for being a stone of hope. Out of a mountain of despair, so many stones of hope, John McKnight. And I'm so grateful for the times week in and week out, for the many sessions here on this technical system. As a baby boomer, it's a challenge, but there's a need and we meet the challenge. So I do a lot of urban missionary work. I do a lot of connecting. Dr. Bryant, through the years, has been, through those 14 years you said, Michael, a part of that, and was a strong, strong engine, Calvary Hill, in helping us to do many of those works then, until things ran dry. We're in a low-income community, and so things had to take a turn, but we keep going with our services. I'm out in the street during this pandemic, and not just as a missionary, but now as a San Francisco COVID task force person with Mega Black San Francisco, and added on to that the social injustice Stand Together San Francisco, for solidarity, unity, peace, and love. And walking into people, going door to door, checking on our small business associations, asking them how are they doing, getting them supplies. Thank God for John McKnight and Hafisa, the gloves, the mask, and all of that that comes to help us serve meals to the families in need, and making sure our seniors. And then there's a community lost and hidden, the immigrants that are afraid to come and get in line. They won't come and get in line. They're afraid to go and get vaccinated. Trying to speak with them, trying to help them, doing leadership training to at least one so they could go back to their community. Sitting with places like Old School, talking to them, crying, praying, hoping their doors don't shut down, sitting with the storekeepers, praying with them, taking them masks, hoping they don't shut down, because we only have a couple of grocery stores, a couple, barely a couple of grocery stores, Food Co. in our community that's not really high with standards. And then a Super Safe that overcharges and has better products, but it's hard. It's very hard. And we have our schools, Rise Prep University. They pay 90% of the students' tuition to make sure that every child they serve here in Bayview, Treasure Island, District 5, District 10 is served with quality service. But having to give during the pandemic technical equipment and all, it's been a challenge. It's been a challenge. So how do we recover from this? All of the extra things. And then you have families of a lot of our leaders that are doctors and teachers, nurses, and frontline people that are working in the stores that keeps us alive. And yet I hear the doctors are saying, when this settles, we're gonna need post-traumatic stress help. And that's going to be all of us. So the funds that are needed, I just appreciate so what Dr. Reverend Rohr has said about the application, the language. We speak a different language. Ours is amen, and it's resurrection, it's reconciliation, but that's not on those applications. And so how do we recover? How, and running through rabbit holes, asking the numbers that we're given to ask what does this mean? How do we answer this? What is it saying? By the time we get the answer, as you said, that money's run out. So when and who and how do we get support with going straight to the place, right to that office, be it online or be it by phone? When do we get not a rabbit chase, but how do we get straight to the place that's needed to help us recover? To help us.
Question.
Yeah. And I probably couldn't say this enough during the last 15 months, but I keep saying, I do encourage people to reach out to SBA, us directly here in the district office. SBA did set up a lot of like 1-800 numbers to try to help triage through applications and stuff. And especially early on, I mean, let me first admit, people were like on the phone waiting 6 hours and I was like, no, call us. We're out there screaming, like, call us directly, or email us. Email was even faster because we had everybody remote, right? So we could round robin emails much more quickly than phone calls. But we really are we're trying to be, as responsive and answer those questions as quickly as we can. And I know sometimes it's technical and it's like, okay, as a nonprofit, what does gross receipts mean for me? What do I include in gross receipts? Because I don't just sell a good, obviously, or to the public, and making sure that you've found the right information. And sometimes I will admit in this past year with the disaster programs, we launched brand new programs that never existed before, like with PPP inside of a week, which is, if you've ever in the government tried to launch a program in a week, that's like unheard of. So of course you're not going to have thought through every scenario inside of a week. And we were, as much as I'm sick of this analogy, we were literally building that airplane while we were flying it. And so it was a chaotic time. I will be the first to admit that. And that's why I always tell people, but do come back to us. Like even in a time of I'm not actively applying for an application, but I'm trying to think about if there's other resources or other things that I should be connecting with, or is there education opportunities that I can be connecting with, so that the next time a program comes around, will I be in a better place to understand how to apply? And I think that's a piece that we as SBA should really take a good hard look at. And I will, hopefully with my team moving forward, say, hey, let's figure out how we get some of these, sometimes it's good business practices, sometimes it's just education. I always tell business owners, and this is true for nonprofits, like you don't need to be an accountant, but you do need to understand your numbers, because the numbers is the language of business, whether we like it or not. So you do need to kind of understand what that means and what those numbers are telling you. But if you have the luxury of hiring a professional to actually do it for you, great. But otherwise, let us help you figure out what some of those terms and conditions are, and what you need to look at with your data in order to fill in the blanks on, gross receipts and some of those other items. I just lost one thing I was going to say,
Do this before that last thing, just to respond to something you said that was so key. Call us. Now in the low income communities, and here where we are, we're isolated. We don't know. This is wonderful meeting, Julie, but have you thought about maybe connecting with the San Francisco Foundation or San Francisco Interfaith and saying, this is the information the people will need?
we're gonna, Dr. Scott, we're gonna put that out, that information out when we send this recording link today. So rest assured, okay? That contact information is gonna be on there. And that was one of the priorities in bringing Julie here. Thank you for that
Yeah,
very
and-
important perspective and insight, because it needed to be said. And if you'll permit me the prerogative of the moderator to follow up, Dr. Scott, on what you said. I remember sitting in the mission at Mission Dolores with a number of the clergy from the neighborhood. And we were tackling a controversial subject at the time. I won't go into it, but what I said at the end, after we were somewhat victorious, I said, I really think that each one of your congregations ought to join the neighborhood associations as well as the merchants associations. I said, because you are neighbors and you are businesses in the community. And that said, the nature of what our congregations do, many of them, in order to survive, rent out their spaces. They rent out their spaces to AA groups. They rent out their spaces as catering facilities. And a number of them, because the acoustics are so magnificent, rent out their spaces to Philharmonic and other symphonic groups and choral groups. And I guess my question is, on those monies that come in, they are paying tax, because this is rental income. This is above and beyond. I'm wondering, and I don't want to try to stump the band on this, but in everything that you said, because they are paying tax on these rental relationships they have, does that give them any other added benefit in terms of the programs that you were offering today and speaking to?
One, it depends on if it's structured, assuming it's not structured as a separate, entity that operates and receives income differently from the core nonprofit. I think if it's all blended in one business, it can be included, right? When you're trying to demonstrate, gross receipts, so we can give a baseline for how much you can be eligible for some of these programs, like the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, for example. So that it can help support that, to show like, hey, we use 2019 as the baseline, right? Pre-COVID, so that in theory, unless you were brand new, was a quote normal year, operating year, because we had to have some sort of baseline. And then looking at, what happened in 2020 and the impact. And now that we're into 2021, we even, for businesses that maybe you got an economic injury disaster loan. This is one thing I failed to mention. So you got one in 2020, that when we had the cap of 150,000. If you want additional funds, you can come back and ask us for more money now. We can go up to $500,000 total. So we can increase the size of those loans. And you now have data from 2020, right, to show that, hey, I really, I knew I took a hit, but look, I am down, 70% on my revenue from all these different sources that I normally get, whether it's rentals, whether it's, from the collection plate, whether it's from a grant program that you normally get annual funding from, and maybe it ceased providing funds in 2020 as well. So you do have that data to show in comparison as well, which can help further support why you have an economic need. Now, again, it's, in the pandemic times, the thought of an economic need is a pretty low bar. It's pretty easy to demonstrate across the board, but it does give you some added data, I think.
Thank you. And I want to say a special thank you, Julie, for this presentation, and to Megan and Carolyn and Joseph. I would also like John McKnight to turn on his video and unmute himself, and ask the same of Hafisa, because John McKnight is owed a special gratitude. He played a very special role in introducing us. And John, would you say a few words, because I know that this is at the heart of your passion of what you're doing right now, and we thank you. I just want to publicly say that.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you so again, Julie, for taking the time to be with us this morning. the breadth of service, the breadth of engagement that our faith partners conduct on behalf of our communities, how they bring us together, how they serve us, how they elevate the needs of people that we need to make sure are cared for, not just today, but in every day that we are in service. Everything we can do to support them is of value. That you took the time to come here today and show us more resources that can be brought to help continue to ensure that everyone here can continue to do their business and serve the communities that they reach. The impact they make cannot be underestimated, and I thank you for the time you're here today to help them get back on their feet so that others can rise up in this time. So thank you, Julie.
John McKnight not only talks the talk, but he walks the walk. He is the treasurer of our organization, but also in his capacity with the COVID Command Center, he has been convening every Tuesday, getting into the weeds, I say, and answering questions that faith leaders have throughout the city. You know, we've been putting out the information, we've been offering these briefings, but he's made that commitment. And so for today's program, I asked him to recommend the panelists, and he did so, and did so admirably, because we got the best of the best. And so as we're saying thank you, I also want to say thank you to Cynthia Zambucas at the Interfaith Council, who is the hero behind the scenes, who helps us to produce and get the information out, as well as to Elisa Carawala and Sharon Walton over at the COVID Command Center. They've just been amazing support to us, and with this platform and that staff, we've been able to do what we've been able to do. With the threat of impending drought and water levels at a dangerous low, we invite you all to join us next week as we welcome Julie Ortiz from the Public Utilities Commission, who is going to speak to us about the importance of water conservation as we enter into this period of drought and look at the possibility of fire. So I hope you all are with us. It's something that is germane to all of us, and I know even in the region, these issues bring the interfaith councils of our neighboring counties together as well. That concludes today's program. Thank you all, and thank you again, Julie, in particular, for this amazing program. We look forward to sharing the links with everybody, as well as how to get in touch with you directly, so that folk can get access to the services they need. God bless you and God keep you.